Dancing Bear, Sandy Friedman. Sandy started us off in the sparkler business. Fabulous guy. George DiCaprio. George is the father of Leonardo. Joel Diamond. Newton Finley. My mom dated Newton Finley. Rob Gordon. Steve Gordon. And of course their father, Bunny and Irv Gordon. Irv was our family dentist and my father's good friend, and we called him Uncle and Aunt Bunny and Uncle Irv, and considered the Gordons to be like cousins for us. Steve is an anesthesiologist in Santa Barbara, or at least the last time I talked to him. Hi, we're working on the book, and we're at Sandy Ditas and D. Durkee, Peter Santiago, Ted Gilmore, Elliot Friedman, Dan Richmond, Debbie, Paul Greenstone, George and Ermila DiCaprio in New York, Peter Fleming, Detroit Institute of Arts, Karen Seligson, the Kachina Answering Service, Paula England, Ron Koblin, Sadie Koblin, Ron Koss, Kathy Hausman, Barb Henley, Albert E. Kahn, Kay Kaplan, The Hog Farm, Judith Ann Perlin, Bob Kosak, June King, Herschel Friedman, Doris Singer, Rob Johnson, Barbara Henley, Larry Larson, Lori Mitchell, Louie, oh Louie, my boat partner, Wally Marsh, Shelby Miller, Last Gasp, Joe and Rosanna Mulkey, Wally Marsh, Lindsay Lowinger, Paul Lowinger, Lauren Richmond, from Grace Mitchell, Cleveland, Joe Miller, that's Juan Tomas Gibre Miller, who we'll have to talk about, Lipton Robinson, Pat Mark, Vince Lubin, Mrs. McMurray, Moon Kate Nixon, Dick Marshall, Page Airlines, Richard Levy, Lee Ostro, Lawrence Ostro, Rodney Logan, Pacific High, Captain Gas, that's Andy Romanoff, Ron Turner, Last Gasp Eco Funnies, Lonnie and Sue Propus, John Paul, says it's a cousin, I don't even know who that is, Karen Reed, Robert Rose, Karen Richter, Freddie Robinson, Martin Vanderkamp, Danny Smith, Sandry Bowl Hubie, Sue and That Man, wound up living with Candace King. Charlie Tweedle, Ralph Sherman, Bobby Schaff, Shel Siegel, Mickey Schur, Bobby Samuels, That's Kathy Hausman's brother, and that's the fellow that worked with the fellow that I mentioned before, Joe Bird. Mark and Robin Schrager. Mark Schrager. Wow. Keo Cherie. Doug and Maggie. Steve Sherman. Ken Strauss. Julie Shaw. Bob Sterling. Ron Turner. Terry at Pacific High. Sally and Jay Boyer. Sam Strauss. Sherry Sherman. Del Warner. Chris Williams, and I think that Chris is like the mother of Julie Williams, and Julie is my, my female counterpart kind of character. Get into that in a minute. Norm and Missy Weingarten, friend of Mark Schrager's, and Missy designed some jewelry for the Collie Jewel Company. Chris Williams, Willie Smith, Wells Fargo Banks, C. Houston. Okay, Debbie Warfield, Don Yankee, that's it. The following are going to be more people stories. C.R. Phil, or Pyle. C.R. could have been my lover and my wife and the mother of my children, had it not been for the fact that she met Rick Harkness about an hour before me at San Francisco State. That was about 1970. And we've been friends ever since. I haven't seen C.R. In a number of years, but we've done a lot of things together. We hung out down in Palm Springs, when her and Ron Gold were hanging out together, and her guru Bob, I think the father of her child, Robin. And Rick Harkness is still editing for the big guys, and works here in San Anselmo out of his house. He has a Final Cut Pro set up. I'm sure it's fabulous. Around 1967, I was running the Wayne State Cinema Guild. Actually, I started the Wayne State Cinema Guild, and I had a hippie underground theater, literally underground, in the center of Wayne State University. It was a lot of fun. And I was a radical filmmaker in those days. And Emil Basila was also a hippie radical filmmaker, and also had a theater that he showed in the Inner Cities Repertories Theater. He had an underground theater that he showed once or twice a week. So we became friends then, and here it is, 2003. Emil lives in Sebastopol, California now. We knew each other from Detroit, Michigan. We've been friends ever since. I don't see him as often as I'd like, but he's a wonderful guy, and lived up there, raised a daughter, and married a lovely lady. And I once put my VW van in the back of his property and lived out there writing a science fiction feature-length film. I don't remember the name of it, though. Albert E. Kahn. In 1974, I was at an airport, and the fellow behind me, an older gentleman in his early 70s anyhow, he started talking to me. He says, "I'm a famous writer," he said to me. I said, "Oh." famous writer. And he cited these books that he had written about political exposés, and I looked him up when I got home, and sure enough, he was a famous writer, and he had written a lot of books on exposing the political scene. He exposed Watergate in a book long before Watergate happened. He was raised in Michigan. I remember it very well. His father was Albert Kahn, who was a very famous architect along the same lines as Frank Lloyd Wright. And he would come down the stairs and listen to the conspiracies as a child, Albert E. Kahn, of all the motor companies. The GM family was in their social sphere. And he, a nice Jewish young man, absconded with a young woman, Rieta. I think she was the Pillsbury girl. And anyhow, they were opposed to the marriage, and they got together and they got married. Had 3 great kids. I think they're in politics here now. Albert's long gone. In fact, I went up to visit him a couple years before he died, which was, I guess, about 1977, 78. And he was cleaning out his workroom and throwing books out and cleaning up his life. And he said he did not want to leave a mess for his wife, who he's loved for so long, to clean up after him. So sure enough, he cleaned up everything, and as soon as he cleaned it himself up, and his office up, and everything was ready to go, he was driving along the highway and had a heart attack and died in the car. Very great. Wonderful. And a great family, and a life that one could be very proud to have. Kay Kaplan was one of my first teachers of love. She was Kay Kaplan. Well, I was 17 years old, and I moved to New York City. Maybe I was a little older than 17. I moved to New York City. I was living there. Wait a minute. Hi. I was 21 years old, moving to New York City. As I moved to New York City, my godmother, Edith Stein, told me to look up this woman named Kay Kaplan, and that she would take good care of me and show me New York. I called her up, and Kay Kaplan was an elderly lady. She was about 70, 75, 76 at the time, and she was fascinating. She was one of the most amazing women that I had ever met until that time. She was a mistress for a famous painter by the name of André Duval, who painted for the 1936 World's Fair exposition in New York on Staten Island. And she was incredible, filled with life. It was like a Harold and Maude kind of situation. I would pick her up once a week. We'd go out. She'd show me around. She'd fill me with ideas and thoughts. And then we'd get to the door, and she'd give me $50. And I'd tell her, because that's our agreement, is I was a paid escort friend. I'd say, Kay, you don't have to leave me off here. Would you like me to come in? And she would say, no. By the time you take off the wig and off the false eyelashes, and my breasts were removed so you take off the falsies, and my uterus removed so there's nothing left of me except what you've already gotten, which is my spirit. And I've always blessed Kay for giving me that and so much more. I couldn't express it. After I moved from New York, Kay and I kept in regular touch. She was, I guess it's about 8 years after that. And I was living on Head Street. And I got a letter from Kay. She was 94. And she said that she had typed the letter, which was atypical. And she said that she was typing the letter because she had just had a stroke. And her right side of her body was paralyzed, and she was sad to say that this has postponed her 8th trip around the world. That's the kind of lady that Kay Kaplan was. She lived. I had sex for the first time when I was 16 years old. It was not such a great experience. I had been looking forward to it for 4 years and had almost accomplished it 2-3 times, but I hadn't at that point. My friend Donnie Horowitz came over, and I was 16 and he was 17, and we decided to go downtown and find a couple of prostitutes and lose our virginity. We went downtown, we found a couple of prostitutes, we were in my father's station wagon. I was in the front seat, Donnie was in the back seat. These girls had been on the street for too long, and the smell was so incredibly bad for me I couldn't get excited, and it was a terrible experience. And we went back home, and wow, I felt slimed, is all I can say, dirty, and I needed to just shower and forget about the experience. And Donnie and I shared the shower and bathroom because there was only one bathroom. And we both showered, and then I shaved, and I was putting on cologne, and I used in those days a Hudson cologne bottle top, which was a big cork top. And as I was putting it on, Donnie bumped into me, and the top fell off into the toilet as the toilet was flushing. So it didn't get stuck in the first part of the toilet, it got stuck in the second part of the toilet. That was a Saturday night. Sunday, we had to have the plumber come up, lift the toilet, get the bottle cap out, and my father made me pay for the plumber. It was $45 for the plumber, $5 for the girl. I call it my $50 fuck experience. Wow. The next day, after I agreed to pay for the toilet and the plumber, my father said, "Well, what did you do to lose consciousness like that?" And I said, "Dad, Donnie Horowitz and I went downtown and we got laid." And he looked at me and he said, "Well?" And I said, "Well, you know, I got to tell you, it was a dirty, disgusting, despicable experience, and I wouldn't like to do it again." And he looked at me and he said, "Son, I've always told you to try anything once, and what you like, try again. I'd like to make an exception to the rule at this point. I want you to go out and try this one again." That was my dad.